Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Well, I can't speak for all the other schools in the country, but I can tell you this. The University of Maryland is holding up its end of the bargain in March Madness, where there really hasn't been much madness. Both the men's and the women's team provided it on consecutive days. You thought the buzzer beater on Sunday was a big deal for the Maryland men, and it was. Well, yesterday's game between the Maryland women and Alabama was even better, double overtime. Didn't have a buzzer beater, but it had moments, and it was absolutely incredible to see Maryland come out on top after being down by 17 in the second half. We'll talk about that. Bob Carpenter's going to do one more lap around the track and say, see you later. We'll talk about that coming up. You know, I was looking back at all the different announcers, not just for the Nationals, and the Nationals relative to other teams in town have had a short stay. I mean, this is, season 21 for them. The Commanders, Washington football team, Redskins, they've been here since 1937. We got the hockey team in 1974. The Bullets came here from Baltimore in 1973. So there's a lot of different announcers that have come and gone here. And I'm going to give you my memories of them. Maybe they'll jog some for you. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But, man, what a game yesterday. And what a rise it's been for women's sports. I have to be honest with you. I have a daughter. She played sports. She played rec soccer, and she played a little bit of basketball, and very supportive of her. And she now has a daughter, and I'm sure that she will at least play rec soccer, rec sports, maybe even high school sports. Who knows? But the rocket ship that has gone on the back of Caitlin Clark, I think she's had an awful lot to do with it. But women's sports in general have been rising. I mean, it's just the last couple of years. It's been absolutely incredible. And let's not forget that last year's women's final in the NCAA Tournament with Caitlin Clark playing drew twice as many viewers as the men's NCAA championship game, with Connecticut becoming the first team since Florida in the early 2000s, or about 2007, I think is when they did it, going back-to-back. That did not draw as many eyeballs as the women's final, half, as a matter of fact. So there's been a big rise in that. And yesterday, playing at 5 o'clock, tough for people to get there. They drew a little over 5,000 people to Xfinity, which holds, I think, about 17 or 18,000. But, watching on TV, they seemed pretty loud. And they saw a performance for the ages. I mean, it really was. Alabama has a player whose name is Sarah Ashley Barker. Her dad, Jay Barker, was a quarterback at Alabama. Now, there's no bigger position maybe in college football than quarterbacking Alabama. He did it before the days that they were regular participants in the championship game, or they didn't really have championship games in those days, before the arrival of Nick Saban. But she is, I guess, Alabama royalty, and she gave it everything she had yesterday, scoring 45 points, which is a school record, whereas Maryland got more balanced scoring. Their top scorer had 28 points. But, Maryland had a chance to lock this up in the first overtime, but Barker was fouled with like 0.3 seconds left on the clock shooting a three-pointer. She calmly stepped up the line, probably has nerves of steel like her dad, and knocked down all three. They went to a second overtime, and Maryland won the game by 3. This was Brenda Freese, the Maryland coach, in the news conference as soon as it was over.
Overtime is our time. And just, can't say enough, just so proud of this group. That it's going to be a heavyweight fight. Both teams, you saw the competitive spirit, the mindset to want to go on to the next round. I thought we came out with a great mindset. We punched first, and then Alabama responded with the character that they have. Really, no team deserved to lose this game tonight. Both teams were so good.
She's done a remarkable job. She's been there a long time. I think she's been there probably 25 years or more, maybe close to 30. I'm not sure. But she gets her 100th win over a top 25 team. That's significant as well. They have been in the Sweet 16 for the fourth time. It's fourth time now in 5 years that they get there. And, you think about the rise of women's sports. Maryland competed in what was called the AIAW until I think like 1978 or 79. They were among the early participants in the championship game. The first powerhouse in women's basketball was a school called Immaculata, small private school in Pennsylvania. And Kathy Rush was the coach. And those women played in skirts. You can look this up. If you want to go back and look, it's not, for me anyway, it's not that long ago, but a little over 50 years ago, women's basketball was played by a powerhouse team in skirts, and they came to College Park at Cole Fieldhouse, and they beat the crap out of Maryland. And Maryland has always had pretty good teams and really good teams, won a national championship and have been in multiple Final Fours. Just to see it now at this level, 5,000 people is not what you want to see in a second-round NCAA championship game, but also realize, how many people are attracted to watching it on television, and the television deal for the WNBA has gone through the roof. It's more like, I think it's gone up like 7 or 8 times or something like that. And Caitlin Clark has certainly had a lot to do with it, but the momentum that she's bringing into the sport, it's going to exist. I mean, if you listen to me 15 years ago, I was, kind of poo-pooing all those people who talked about the rise of the game. Hell, Tony Kornheiser, 35 years ago, covered a Maryland game against Virginia. This is when Virginia had a great team, and they had twin sisters named Burgee. And they had a big crowd to see them because at the time they were a big deal. And Tony wrote a line, which I've often kidded him about over the years, but maybe he was just ahead of his time. He said, "I have seen the future of basketball, and it wears a ponytail." And I think you got to look at what has happened to the women's game and what happened yesterday. Pretty incredible, and great job for Maryland. Now, it's going to be tough. They play the 2-time defending champs on Friday in Birmingham, South Carolina, close to home. But, you never know. It's a tournament that anything can happen in one game, and Maryland's good. They're balanced. They lose one player. They've got others who could step up and fill in. And, it might be one of those great moments for not just for women's basketball, but for basketball when they play on Friday. Now, this was not a good moment last night. And I don't know how closely you've been following this. You know that Jaden Daniels lives with his mom, Regina Jackson, and she also has been certified as an agent. So 2 years from now, when they start to negotiate a long-term deal, she will be the one doing the negotiating. But she is also very protective of her son, and she's let it be known she does not want any women sinking their claws into her son until he's ready for that. So there was a great visual from the weekend. They live I guess they have homes here and in Los Angeles. That's where they're from. And so Jaden Daniels was at basketball game over the weekend. USC, much like Maryland, gets to host the first 2 rounds at home. And so he's a fan of all sports, I'm sure, but there seems to be some sort of budding relationship with Juju Watkins. And he was there to watch as they won their game against UNC Greensboro, 71-25. She had 22 points in that game. And then they had the second game, and so he was there, and she sat down next to him to watch. Well, at some point, Regina Jackson was sitting in between them. Now, I don't know whether that was a request by mom for Juju to move over, but, social media jumped all over this, and, it was like, oh, my God, going out of her way to protect her son. Well, yeah, she is. She's doing that, and he's apparently okay with it. He's a grown man. He's 24 years old. He doesn't have to live with his mom. He's chosen to live with his mom. And so, here he was with, a woman who she may make more money than he does, as a matter of fact. He's under a rookie contract. He doesn't have very many endorsements. She's got a ton of endorsements. You turn on TV, and she's got a very distinctive look with the way she wears her hair, so you kind of know who she is. So, if she's going to be a gold digger, I don't know if this is necessarily a gold digger situation. But the mom is in between them. Anyway, he was there last night, and very, very sadly, in the first quarter of their game, Juju Watkins went down for what they say is a season-ending injury and is being reported as a torn ACL. Just a terrible thing. They blew out Mississippi State without her, but looks like her season is over for sure. And with a torn ACL this late, you don't know whether it'll mean she'll have to sit out next year as well. But it was a devastating injury for USC. And on top of that, the fans, and I don't know what kind of crowd they had there last night at USC, but the fans got angry about this and got riled up. This was Holly Rowe, courtside reporter who was on with Scott Van Pelt last night.
I can tell you that the building was just absolutely aghast. There were a lot of really negative feelings here. In fact, just moments ago, some tempers really flared in the handshake line. People were upset about the injury and the fans getting into it, really booing and yelling. It kind of got ugly at the end here, but people really upset about how this happened with Juju Watkins. I can tell you that she is a tough young woman. Lindsey Gottlieb told us at halftime she's one of the toughest players she knows, that she will overcome this in one way or another. We just don't know how severe the injury is. I won't speculate, Scott, but I will tell you I've covered a lot of knee injuries in my time. The angle of the replay does not look good. It would be a surprise if this isn't a significant knee injury, but we will not speculate and hope that the magnetic resonance imaging will be going well for her at Keck Medical Center right now.
And I said non-contact. I misspoke there clearly as I'm looking at the knee, and there is some contact there. And you said the tempers flare. You understand that the fans and the building being emotional because this is a true superstar and someone who carries herself with just grace in every possible way. Were there feelings that shove was something that contributed to that fall?
Yeah, things got pretty ugly in the building. Every time that player would touch the ball from then on, they would get booed. And in the handshake line just now, some words were exchanged, and people really had to get in between the two teams and separate them. So just, some bad feeling here. She is beloved here in this community, and these people here love Juju, and her teammates, of course, having her back. So just an unfortunate situation all the way around. And I am sure no one is ever going to intentionally harm someone, but just that's how basketball goes, and it was some contact on that play, and people felt some kind of way about that.
That's Holly Rowe with Scott Van Pelt last night. I mean, that's awful that people get that. Injuries happen, and I'm sure it was not intentional. I mean, are they going to say that a goon trying to knock her out of the game? No, I don't think so. It's just a unfortunate thing. And if you look at the play, I mean, it's two players going for the ball. I don't see that as anything that was egregious. But this is really ugly. Talked about this yesterday. Danny Hurley and Connecticut went out to Florida. And they went out playing hard. It was a close game, and Hurley said they went out with honor. Yeah, the players did. He did not. And if you've seen this, I think it's still up. I'm sure it's still up. And more than 1 million people, as of yesterday afternoon, had watched it. Hurley's coming off the court after they lost, and it's not one of his players that's yelling. He's yelling. And he's yelling at the Baylor players who are going on the court to warm up for their game. And he said, quote, "I hope they don't bleep you like they bleeped us. I hope they don't do that to you." He was upset about the officiating in the loss, and here's Baylor going out to warm up against Duke. I mean, it's as clear as day. It's been caught on somebody's cell phone camera. Well, the cell phone camera that it was caught on was a reporter for Charlotte Live Sports. His name is Joey Ellis, and he put it up there. And, I mean, you could request that you take it down, but that's not what the sports information director for UConn did. He's reportedly, his name is Bobby Mullen, he reportedly confronted Ellis, asking him to take down the video, and reportedly said to him, "I will ruin your life if you don't take it down." Charlotte Live Sports requested a statement from Bobby Mullen, the sports information director, and he responded, "The lasting image of Coach Hurley leaving the court should have been him walking off arm in arm with his seniors, overwhelmed with emotion. Instead, a reporter who was in the area he should not have been recorded on his cell phone a private comment he made to members of another coaching staff. No. That was not a private comment. He yelled that out. You can look at that. And yes, that should have been a nice warm moment, walking off arm in arm with seniors, not cursing, using the worst word you can use, and basically saying he got screwed by the refs and saying, I hope you don't get screwed. No. Don't do that. So anyway, Mullen then later wrote on a post, he said, PR man yells at reporter, news at 11. I have a journalism degree, and I know the difference between reporting and seeking out gotcha moments. My temper flared a bit in a moment of weakness after a loss, but I think the journalists I work with would regularly vouch for me. No, they wouldn't. He had access there. He had a credential. And I've been in these situations many times. That you're sent to an area as a reporter where you wait for the locker room to open or the media room to open. He I'm sure, was standing in a place that he was allowed to stand in with his credential. And this PR guy decides, he's going to be a thug and he's going to try and pick on a reporter who's, with a small operation, I would imagine, Charlotte Sports Live. It's local in the Raleigh area where the game was played. So now I don't think Bobby Mullen's going to keep his job much longer because the NCAA is investigating this and the Raleigh police are investigating this because when somebody says that I will ruin your life, that's a verbal threat. That's a verbal threat. And I think there's charges that could be filed. I don't know if there's video of this, but we have not heard Mullen deny that. Mullen didn't say, I didn't say I will ruin your life. So, it's one thing to be protective of your coach, but when your coach behaves like a child, a petulant child, and it did something that if a high school coach saw one of his players do that, he'd grab him by the ear and drag him into his office and say, hey, son, we're not going to put up with that anymore. And if you do that again, we're going to throw you off the team. This was the coach acting like that. And now the SID who wants to be Luca Brasi? Come on. So I'll be interested in this, but I don't think Bobby Mullen is long for his job as sports information director at Connecticut. All right, coming up, more on the tournament. Got 7 from the SEC in, including John Calipari, who says, oh, woe is me, I'm always the underdog. Oh, really? It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I'm kind of amazed at all the kvetching about no Cinderellas in the NCAA tournament. Yeah, if they happen along the way, it's cool. I mean, it was wonderful when George Mason made it to the Final Four. That's been 19 years. And we've had some incredible upsets along the way, like UMBC beating number one seed Virginia, and then Virginia coming back the next year to win the NCAA tournament. You had a couple of years ago, Fairleigh Dickinson, a 16, knocking out Purdue, the number one. They come back the following year and make it to the final game. But the purpose of the NCAA tournament is to determine the best team in the country. Doesn't always work out that way. Along the way, the best team could get knocked out because it's one and done. That's the beauty of it. That's why we love it so much. But to feel like you're entitled to have it every year, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Jay Billis was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and we'll play what he said at 10 o'clock about all this. But Chuck Culpepper in the Post takes a look at the numbers for this year. And he says, this tournament became the 6th since the seeding structure began in 1985. That was the first year, by the way. They went to 64. And the first since 2017, in which the team seeded number 13 through 16 went 0-16. For the 12th time, there's only one double-digit seed in the closing 16. There were none in 1995 and 2007, just as there were 5 in 1999, 4 in 2011, 2021, and 2022. And that double-digit would be number 10, Arkansas, a storied program whose 6 Final Four berths included a national title under Nolan Richardson. The 4 number 16 seeds, given hope by the recent years, like I mentioned, UMBC in 2018, FDU in 2023, lost by a combined 128 points. Well, that's, the way it's supposed to be. That's why they seed it that way. If it happens that along the way there's an upset, fine, but you can't expect it every year. He says number 15 seed Robert Morris stuck admirably with Alabama. Every tournament can use a surging Robert Morris, and hinted at the kind of outrageous March Madness that the American brain has come to require. But its 65-64 lead with 7 minutes left led to an 81-71 deficit and then a 90-81 loss. He points out that the Big Ten at one point stood 10-0 in games and stands 12-4 with a quarter of the SEC has 7, as I say. Big 12 went 6-1 in the first round with Kansas, the lone team out, and the SEC with their 14 gets 7 at this point. And Jay Bilas said this going into the tournament. He looked at the seedings and he said all 4 number ones could make it to the Final Four, which did happen in 2008. So, this isn't the craziest thing that's ever happened that we have all this chalk going forward, but it is what it is, and people like to complain. 7 from the SEC, half the teams that win in the tournament still alive with 16 to go. You could look at it like that's not a good thing, or that's just the way it is. It's a money game now. The SEC has football teams that get in. It's like when you want to buy advertising for something. Okay, you buy this, but you also have to buy that. It's a package deal. So boosters come in. They want to donate to the football team, fine, but we also need you to donate to the basketball team before we give you, prime seats or however they do it. So this was Tony and Pablo Torre in for Wilbon yesterday on PTI on the 7 that made it from the SEC and what it means for the tournament.
Pablo, has the SEC justified all those bids?
Absolutely. And it's not going to be the thing we remember from this year, the SEC vindicating itself after being doubted in light of the committee getting a record 14 into the field. It's going to be remembered as the first year of this ongoing experiment in earnest about the transfer portal and NIL and what it does to the thing we all care about when it comes to this sport, really, which is to say, are we at a point where the talent market is now more efficient? What do I mean by this? I mean, if you're really good and you're at a mid-major, are you now just going to be bought and sold towards these power conference teams, such that a mid-level power conference team in the SEC is going to gobble up all of the would-be Cinderellas? David doesn't have a sling anymore. That's my concern here, Tony. So how do I feel about this? I'm worried for the television product because there are forces that might explain it as we conduct the experiment.
So normally I would sit here with Wilbon, as you know, and Wilbon is deeply distrustful of the SEC and of Duke. And every time we had Jay Bilas on the show this year, Wilbon would talk about, this is overstated, this is overrated. And he'd finally turn to Jay and he would say, can't be that good, right? And Jay would say, no, Mike, they are that good this year. The SEC is that good this year. 7 of the last 16 is really something. And the outlier, I mean, the longest shot on the board is John Calipari at a 10. So it's going to be a chalky tournament because he's never Cinderella. Never. That's impossible. I understand precisely what you're saying about wondering if there's a market correction here. And this is something that I wanted to say. It's the sort of underlying point to what you're saying. It wasn't the tournament that we're used to seeing in the first weekend. There were only 2 really major upsets, McNeese State, right, and Drake, and they were dispatched by the second game rather handily. So now you have a flood of ranked teams. You want to say that the seeding people did it right, but it also makes me sad because the fireworks that we expect did not materialize. You got 12 of the 16 are 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds. 7 of them are 1s and 2s. It's not satisfying to me. I don't know the explanation. You seem to suggest we're going to see this all the time. I don't know that, but it's not satisfying the way it usually is.
Yeah, my whole thing with college basketball, and I covered the tournament in person for Sports Illustrated year after year after year, the hard part was the glorious part. I had no idea who these people were. I was learning about these characters. Ali Farouk-Manesh, Steph Curry at Davidson. These were characters, by the way, when you have it just being the biggest 4 conferences populating the Sweet 16, You lose
Not
that.
good.
You lose the coalition that makes this different and special and, frankly, American. And so now I'm worried. I am worried if this is a trend.
It's remarkable that for the last 40 years, the best two basketball conferences were the ACC and the Big East. They have a total of one team in. One.
Yeah, that's Duke, and Duke is going to be there every year. But I heard Jay Williams talk about this. I'm not as angry about this as Pablo is. To me, it's, put the best teams on the floor, see what happens. If you have upsets along the way, fine. But, you seed these teams based on who you think should win. And that's what's been happening for the most part. You do have a 10 seed in there. And we'll get to what Tony said about Calipari not being an underdog, which I agree with. But Jay Williams said this, I think, really well. He said, look, when Steph Curry was a sophomore averaging 21 points a game, they went out against Maryland in the tournament. And nobody really raised an eyebrow about that. Year later, he comes back. He's averaging over 30 points a game. They get to the Elite Eight. They knock out some teams along the way. Georgetown was like a 2 seed that year. They knocked him out, and so he was a sensation. He went to the NBA off of that. Well, what Pablo points out is, as a sophomore, if he's averaging 21 points a game, he's too big for Davidson. He gets big money to go where he wants to go, and where he actually would wanted to go, and Seth Greenberg didn't take him, was to go to his father's alma mater, which was Virginia Tech. Del Curry was a great player there, great player in the NBA, and that's where he wanted to go. So what he's saying is that these mid-majors who are pulling upsets along the way don't have those players anymore, because as soon as they're thought to be at the level of a Division I, they can go. And that's been a big factor in these mid-majors being able to win their conferences and get to the tournament, but they just don't have the player to do that. Like Wally Zerbiak, I think he played at Miami of Ohio, if I'm not mistaken, and they made a deep run in the tournament. And Wally Zerbiak was a terrific pro. He played about 10, 11 years. Well, Wally Zerbiak probably wouldn't have gotten to his senior year at Miami of Ohio because he would have been taken by Ohio State or somebody like that. And so that's just the reality of what we're living with now, and it's not going back. They're not going to go back to the old system where players didn't get paid and where if you wanted to transfer, you have to sit out a year. That's not going to happen anymore. So this is the system. You deal with it. Some of the old guys have gotten out. Roy Williams and Krzyzewski and Boeheim and all the, even the younger like Tony Bennett, who's in his 50s, left Virginia before the season started. But some have adapted, and some have managed to get to this point. You still have Tom Izzo in this tournament, and you have John Calipari, who's been there a bunch of times, and selling something that is not exactly accurate here. He is, I guess, what we would call the last Cinderella in the tournament as a 10 seed. But come on, it's Arkansas. 6 Final Four appearances, a national championship. Yet, Calipari on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday had the chutzpah to present himself as an underdog.
Most of my career, I've been that. And so I'm fine in that role. I'm comfortable in the role. I'm just trying to make sure my team is comfortable in that role.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, are you telling them it's nobody believed in us against the world? No? None of that?
No, I'm just saying we're the underdog.
Okay.
And every time they play in those kind of games, they play well. I think, look, we're at that point in the year. The whole thing is, how do I get them to have that mindset that we had against St. John's? Because, look, there's two things happened. We went 2 for 19 from the 3 and gave up 28 offensive rebounds, but still won. We played to win. Don't matter what happens. Doesn't matter they got a rebound. Just keep playing. And we keep them in that attitude and that mindset. It doesn't mean you're going to win, but it gives you a good chance to win.
How do you keep the relationship or whatever with Pitino out of going into a game, coaching a game, and making it about the game, that it's not about you against Rick?
If you went through the year we went through, when we were 0-5, when we were 1-6, and they said they got no chance of making the NCAA tournament, when you're playing games, you're not worried about the other coach. You're about survival. I wasn't worried about Matson with no chess game. I wasn't, he outcoached. I didn't care. It was about, let's just win because what these kids went through, they deserved good to happen because they came together. They became one heartbeat. And, well, what did you do? What did I do? They knew if they didn't come together, they were going to lose every game. And they figured this, you know what? I'm so worried about myself. If I worry about the team more than myself, maybe it's easier. And they found out it was easier.
How do you balance coaching right now and the transfer portal all in the same week of preparing and transfer portal starts today?
Well, we yesterday was a kind of long day. Got a lot of film work done, got practice plans prepared, the staff meetings where we were doing everything. And then in the end, I said, all right, let's talk. Now, before you can figure out portal, don't you have to know who's coming back and who's leaving? So I don't know of anybody in these 16 teams that is sitting down with players and say, are you coming back? Are you going to put your name in the portal? So it's just difficult right now. But we've got names and what I would say with anybody listening, if you want to get better, if you want to be challenged, if you want to really play with good players, be coached as though you've already gotten there, to be hugged and challenged and make you uncomfortable then you come with me. You come to Arkansas. But right now, we're not on the phone with anybody yet. My staff may be. I shouldn't say that. My staff may be, but I'm not.
When will you be open or paying more attention to the portal yourself?
If there's a young man that we know is really, really good and he wants to do this and wants to talk to me, you won't believe this, I'd probably get on the phone with him and say, hey, let's do this. But short of that, it's probably mostly staff. My hope is that we have a group. We have some guys that won't be back because they're graduated out or they're going to, put their name in the draft and all that. But there is another grouping of players who are really good that probably need more time, that we do that. We already have 3 guys, freshmen, signed. And I'm going to say this again, and I said it after. I'm still recruiting freshmen. I'll recruit the best freshmen. And as you saw last game, 3 of them played a lot of minutes. But I can't recruit 7 or 8 freshmen. So we got 1 more freshman we're trying to get. We've got 3. One that, they're all really good, okay? But we're trying to get 1 more. And then who comes back? And then probably a couple transfers.
Is the SEC a football conference or a basketball conference?
You're trying to get me in trouble? Last time I said something like that stuff, people went nuts. And then you find out that, they're investing in what they want. So I told our baseball coach, they were number 1 in the country, and right there, they're going to win a College World Series. Every game they played, every weekend, they knew they could win or lose. What about the football? You want to say Vandy? Well, we got Vandy. Yeah, go play Vandy. Go play them now. Well, we could play Mississippi. Yeah, go play Mississippi. Play Arkansas, Tennessee, and you get beat. I mean, that's what happens. Well, it's now basketball the same way. And it's top to bottom. Our bottom 2 teams would have finished in the top half of most leagues. They were that good. But they got into this league, and they started losing. It was like Oklahoma went 13-0, beat people, got in the league and couldn't win early. We were 0-5 to start. And I knew we weren't bad. Well, I wasn't sure. But we were 0-5. And we survived it. And now it looks as though, how many SEC teams are in the Sweet 16?
7.
I know you don't know. Ask your people.
7.
7 is correct. That's John Calipari. Interesting he's saying that he's still recruiting high school players because the team that he beat with Rick Pitino, his longtime rival and once a friend with St. John's, he said, I'll never recruit a high school guy again. So different philosophies, but that's what Calipari plans to do. He's got plenty of cash. He's backed by a chicken magnet. I think it's the Purdue people, and on we go. And they'll play Texas Tech in the Sweet 16 coming up. All right, 22 years ago, my son was 11 years old, and our family was big Maryland basketball fans. My wife went to Maryland. I've been a Maryland basketball fan since the early 70s. One of the crushing sports moments of my life was seeing them lose to NC State in the ACC final in 1974. So my son grew up in a house where people went nuts about Maryland basketball, and things would get so tense when they were good. The four of us would watch on 4 different TVs because we couldn't be around each other. So when he's 9, they make it to the Final Four. When he's 10, they win the national championship. Those are big years as a sports fan. And he's growing up thinking, hey, Maryland's in the Final Four every year. They're right there. Well, as defending champs in 2003, they're playing a first-round game against UNCW. I mean, they're expected to win that. That's not going to really supposedly be much of a game, but Maryland's down, and they're down late in the game. And my son, who's so upset about seeing the Terps losing at this point, goes to bed and cries in his pillow. So the rest of us are watching, maybe on different TVs, I don't even remember, but we're still watching when this happens.
Nicholas, the senior, with 2 seconds. Here he goes for the win. Yes! Nicholas has done it! Maryland on to the second round in a most heroic finish. I said the impersonator of Juan Dixon. That might have been one up on Dixon.
Yeah, so that was incredible. There was a lot of yelling in the house, and he hears it, and he comes walking down, and he goes, well, what's going on here? Well, sorry, Jerry, you missed it. You were crying in your pillow. You missed an incredible ending there. So that was that experience. Now he's fast forward 22 years. He's a grown man now. He's married. He's a teacher. He lives in Seattle. And he saw that he had an opportunity. Nowadays, you can do this with StubHub and everything else, make a last-minute decision. He decided to go to the game on Sunday and actually held up his phone and put it up on Instagram, what Johnny Holiday called.
The Terps are down by 1. And Gillespie looks to inbound. There it goes to Queen. Queen will drive in against Morton. Queen with a shot off the glass. Got it! And the Calipari have won it at the buzzer on a shot. Oh, my goodness. By Derek Queen, 72-71, and you're heading to San Francisco. It's about time. Wow. How about that? Man, oh, man, oh, man.
Johnny Holiday, Chris Nocky, and that's what he saw in person. 3,000 miles across the country, the number one Maryland fan is Scott Van Pelt at his home in Maryland, watching the game with his son, Charlie, who I believe is about 10 or 11. I'm not sure. I think he's about the same age as my son was when Drew Nicholas hit the buzzer beater, only Charlie's sticking by his dad's side. So on his podcast, SVP, that he does with his partner, Stanford Steve, they were reliving how SVP watched the game on Sunday evening with his young son, who is aligned with him. I believe the younger son, he's got a daughter and 2 sons. The younger one's more aligned with mom, who is from Florida and went to Florida. Her family is all Florida fans. So that's going to make for an interesting evening on Thursday when those teams match up. But the older son, Charlie, is with Scott. He's a Maryland fan, and they watch games together. And here was Scott reliving how he and Charlie watched the incredible finish the other night from Seattle.
They're down 2. They run a great play, and they get a look. They hit the 3. I'm like, I didn't cuss. I thought, this can't be how it ends again. And my guy was like, we're going to get, I missed the part where he's like, we're going to take this home. He gave us that. Now, Colorado State, down 1. At this point, my man says, Dad, I don't think we're going to win. And I say, Charlie, one of our mantras on this show, what do you have to do, Steve? Stay in the fight. I said, you got to stay in the fight.
That's it.
Stay in the fight. I'm from Baltimore. Give me the motherfucking ball. That's what Derek Queen said. Willard's like, all right. Queen to the rack, bucket good. Absolute mayhem in our home. Mayhem. All the kids are up. Everyone's jumping around. Red is, he can't figure out what's happening. He's running around in circles. Never seen the big man this happy. It's just incredible. And for a tournament that mostly lacked that, the shot that Colorado State hit to take the lead and then the bucket from Queen, like that's the tournament in a nutshell. And then we have the internet deciding that they hate everything. And what? In real time, that didn't even dawn on me that because I watch basketball and people can pretty much just run now. Gain of 4, first down. I didn't even think about it. Apparently, Steratore is like, no, it's a good play. But I saw Norlander like tweet out late night. Well, I talked to an official and he said that was a walk. Like, what? Okay, so that's what we're gonna slow it down and decide when is the gather step and what. You want to slow it down? You want to show the defender a hip check Queen off his spot? Then that's a foul. If we're gonna go rules McJohnny and Zapruder film this moment, you're saying it's a walk? Cool. There's a foul before the walk. And if you really want to go back, Nick Clifford, who I love, elbowed the absolute crap out of George Geronimo in the first half. And Steratore said, it might have been a flagrant 2, which means he'd have been ejected. At minimum, it's a flagrant 1, 2 free throws on the ball. That was 2 hours ago in the first half. But no one wants to do that. This is all I care to say about it. I didn't think it was a walk. I'm a Maryland guy, so people can roll their eyes at me. So every person on Twitter that he took 3 steps, bucket good, we'll see you in San Francisco.
Yes, sir. That'll be Thursday night when they play Florida. I think it's a 7:40 start. And it just was fun for me to hear Scott talk about watching with his son, because I've watched so many games with my son over the years. And the buzzer beater that happened a generation ago, 22 years ago, while he was not by my side, but he, like Charlie Van Pelt, was doubting in a bigger way, not even wanting to stick around to see it. Charlie's sticking by Dad's side, but he's saying, Dad, I don't think we're going to win. and good for Scott for saying, stay in the fight. And I think it's one of the great lessons, not just for sports, but for life as well. And that was a lot of fun to listen to. Now, again, it's going to be a divided household, apparently, on Thursday night. I don't know if Scott is going to San Francisco for that. I'm not sure about that. But if he stays home in Maryland and watches this game with the family, it's definitely going to be at least a 2 TV night. That they're going to be in separate rooms watching all of that. So that was interesting to listen to. Maryland, by the way, I think it's on the line. It's only 6. I'm kind of surprised by that it's only 6 points. So they may have at this point. You talk about Cinderellas, and I would say this too about all the carping, about the lack of the mid-majors in there. When you get to the Sweet 16 and you have all schools from big conferences where they've played each other, remember that. They've all played seasons against big conference teams, whether it was in their own conference or sometimes out-of-conference games. Those are important, and this was important. We talked about this yesterday. We're coming up on the 40th anniversary of the enormous Villanova upset over Georgetown. Well, as Steve Lapis, who was an assistant on that team, said in a conversation with, I think it was with Dan Patrick, he said, look, we had played them. We had played them twice that year. We played them a bunch of times going back. Ed Pinckney and Patrick Ewing had played against each other a whole bunch of times. So, that is something that it has to be taken into account, that while, yes, you did see these incredible upsets along the way of George Mason, where they knocked out blue blood teams on their way to the Final Four, like North Carolina, Michigan State, and then to get to the Final Four, they beat UConn. When they got to the Final Four, they were completely outmatched by Florida, which won the national championship. And so, when you get to the Sweet 16, oftentimes, not always, because we have had these mid-majors make it to the Final Four, and Florida Atlantic last year made it, so there's that. But oftentimes they are completely outmatched in these matchups when they get to the Sweet 16. I don't think we're going to have that this year. I don't think we're going to have, what we may see in these 8 games over the 4 days starting on Thursday. Well, let's see. We have 4 games Thursday, 4 games Friday, and then 2 more Saturday and 2 more Sundays. That's 12 more games. They may be close. They may all be close games. And when you sit down to watch a game, especially if you don't have a rooting interest in one of the teams, you like to see competitive basketball. You like to see games go down to the wire. All right, coming up, Bob Carpenter says, see you later after the season. We'll look at what he has done in his long run here and what others have done over the years in local sports television broadcasts. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So yesterday, the Orioles and the Nats were scheduled to play an exhibition game at Nats Park. Both of them getting ready to start the season, both back from spring training, both in Florida. It's more unusual these days to see 2 teams playing each other who both train in Florida. A lot of teams have moved out to Arizona, but the Orioles and Nats both train down there, and they'd come north as they get ready to start the season, and it was supposed to be at Nats Park yesterday, but it was rained out. But they still opened up the telecast on MASN, and Bob Carpenter, who is not the only television announcer that the Nationals have had. This is maybe some trivia for you. Mel Proctor. Now, Mel Proctor and John Lowenstein were the gold standard, as far as I'm concerned, in the 1980s for local television broadcasts. In those days, it was home team sports. They were renowned throughout the country for how good the telecast was, and they were really great together. And Proctor also did Bullets games on TV. And he got an opportunity because of Larry Lucchino, who was one of the people in the front office for the Orioles, moving out to San Diego to run the Padres, and he took Mel with him. And it didn't work out that well. Mel was there for a few years and then bounced around doing some other things. I think he did Clippers radio. So when it was announced that the Nats were coming here from Montreal in 2005, and they were going to be on this new network, which was going to be controlled by the Orioles. That's how they were able to pacify Peter Angelos and keep him from suing to bring a team into, it wasn't his market, but he claimed it was his market in D.C. So bringing back Mel Proctor was a pretty cool thing. Like, oh, yeah, I remember. Those are great days when he did Orioles games. He and Lowenstein were terrific together. Well, there were problems. One of it was distribution. The first year, I don't know if you remember this, but unless you lived in D.C., you weren't getting the games. They were on RCN cable. I think I had Comcast at the time. I couldn't get it. You couldn't get it on Fios. There was very little distribution. And Mel let his anger be known. And one night on the air, he gave out his cell phone number just to see if anybody would call it. And that didn't happen. He was also working with a rookie color analyst, Ron Darling. And Ron Darling has become great. He's part of a beloved team with Keith Hernandez and I forget his first name, Cohen. They do the games, and among their fans is Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, they're legendary in New York doing Mets games. But he didn't know how to do it. He's bright. He went to Yale. He's very smart, but he wasn't very good doing it. So that was a 1-year thing. Following year, Bob Carpenter, veteran announcer. He had done a lot of games on ESPN. He'd been the Cardinals announcer. He was a pros pro. So they bring in Bob Carpenter in 2006. He's been here ever since. And for this telecast, which never got off the ground yesterday because the game was rained out, this is how Bob opened it. And you'll hear from Kevin Fransden, who is the color commentator. He's been there for the last few years. And also Dan Kolko, who has had a great rise through the business. One time he was my son's camp counselor at Camp Airy, but he started out as their field reporter in 2014 and then became the pre- and the post-game host. And he does big big bulk of the games when Bob has cut down his schedule in the last few years. So this was the three of them, with Bob opening up the telecast yesterday on Masson.
Well, it's good to be back in our ballpark. And as we do, I've got a little personal news to share with you. The 2025 season will be my final one as the Nats' primary TV play-by-play guy, whatever you like to call me. I'm okay with that. But I've got a new deal working for next year as a full-time husband, dad, and grandpa, and it's been pretty cool to have the kids around for the last couple of months after they moved home from Seattle. So my objective is to, all season long, thank you, Nats fans, for the way that you've been to my wife Debbie and I and our family over these 19 years previously. Let's make number 20 a lot of fun. I'm sure next year at this time, I'll be a little melancholy and a little bit sad with opening day approaching, but feeling like I'm doing the right thing for my family, and that's good enough for all of us. And it's also this year going to be my fourth year with this guy who's going to come sliding in.
I've always wanted to do that.
Guns out, without the sun out on a cold day, but that's Franny being Franny. And my friend, I just want you to know that it was so much fun watching you play for us 11 years ago, I might add, long time. But you've been great for the last 3 years. I look forward to a great year with you and Dan, and maybe this young team surprises us and a whole lot of other people along the line.
You think about it, 20 years ago, you came into this calling everything a breaking ball, right? We didn't have anything, and now you're leaving with sweepers. But you've brought so much energy and passion to the Nationals fans. It's going to be a tough one. But we, Dan and I, and whoever else is in the chair with you, is going to provide as much energy we can to celebrate you. Because that, I think, is the most important thing. Celebrate a lot of things around the district, especially you.
And I've been around long enough to know that when Dan Coco appears on camera and it's a 2-box with 3 guys, that interesting things are about to happen.
Well, Bob, the only interesting thing here is for us to celebrate you, as we're going to do over the course of this season. You've become the voice of summer for fans in the D.C. area for now your 20th season here as the play-by-play guy with this Nationals team. For a Midwest guy through and through, you've put down some small roots here in the D.C. area, and you have formed close ties with so many of these Nationals fans. And for me personally, knowing you for 13 years, working with you as part of the TV broadcast for 11 years, it's been a joy having you around and getting to learn so much from you over the course of this time. And, we're not saying bye to you yet. We've got plenty of time to celebrate you over the course of this season, but just want you to know how much you mean to me and how much you mean to so many people here in this D.C. area.
That's Bob Carpenter, Kevin Franzen, and Dan Kolko, the TV crew, saying goodbye to Bob. He's got a farewell tour coming up this year, which will be his 20th season with the team. It's the 21st year for the team in town, which is crazy. Just time flies by. I mentioned that the first year was Mel Proctor and Ron Darling. Then Carpenter comes along, but there were a lot of color commentators along the way. Franzen is the latest, but Darling was replaced by Tom Paciorek, who played, I believe, with the Dodgers at one point, maybe Seattle. He did 1 year, 2006. Then the late Hall of Fame pitcher Don Sutton did 2 years. Remember this, 2007 to 2008. And then Rob Dibble came in, and I worked with Dibble at ESPN. I like Rob Dibble a lot, but he would sometimes get himself in trouble, which he did when Steven Strasburg was struggling with his arm and he warmed up for a game and wound up not pitching. Dibble basically told him to man up, and it turned out he had a torn elbow ligament, needed the Tommy John, and that's when the team decided to part ways with him, and that gave us F.P. Santangelo for 2011 through 2021, and I thought FP did a fairly good job. I like Franzen a lot. I think he's done an excellent job. And then the old studio show, which no longer exists, done for years by Johnny Holiday and Ray Knight. Johnny did it from 2007 to 2018. Phil Wood did a lot of fill-in there. Michael Morse did some substitute work there. They don't do a studio show anymore. It's just a pregame show, whether it's Kolko doing it or if he's doing the game, somebody else does it. But, in a relatively short period of time, there's been multiple people working with only 2 primary play-by-play people in Mel Proctor and Bob Carpenter, who says this year is going to be his last. We'll see who takes his place. But I got to thinking about the other teams. Now, for the Redskins, you're not going to have this because other than preseason, and it seems like Kenny Albert did it the longest, but there were others along the way. If you're an old-timer, you may remember Chick Hearn doing it. Chick Hearn was a favorite of Jack Kent Cooke because, Cook owned the Lakers when Chick did the play-by-play there, so he brought him in to do football, and that wasn't necessarily his thing. But George Michael did it for a few years when NBC had the games. And now it's, Chick Hernandez, I guess, does them. And some of them are national games. There's only 3 now. One time there were 6. So it's a little different for them. But in looking at the Caps, and Joe Beninati and Craig Laughlin, to me, are the gold standard. They're the best to have ever done it in this town. As good as Carpenter is, as good as Buck was, and Buck is still doing some play-by-play and things like that. These guys have been just terrific together. The chemistry between the two of them is great. And Craig is recovering from heart surgery. Hope he gets back before the end of the season. Hope he gets to call the record-breaking goal for Alex Ovechkin if it happens this year. But Alan May is doing the fill-in now. And those two guys have been together, Beninati and Laughlin, since 1994. Wow. Over 30 years. But in looking back, and I've heard stories about this, the original color commentator for the Capitals when they first came here in 1974 was Warner Wolf. I know Warner. He grew up here. I don't think he knew the blue line from the goal mouth. I mean, he's a wonderful guy, an incredibly successful sportscaster. Hockey not necessarily his thing. Hal Kelly was the TV voice. I don't even know how many games they did at the beginning. I think Channel 9 had the games. There was no cable TV then, or at least in this market. So it was Hal Kelly for the first season with Warner Wolf. And then Ron Weber, I guess, stepped away from radio from time to time because he's been doing radio ever since, or he did radio ever since the team was formed, and did them through the 96-97 season when he was replaced by Steve Colby. But Weber, I guess, did games on television for a couple of years with Jack Doniger, who was a longtime radio guy, I guess knew hockey, and he did that for a couple of seasons. I don't remember this name. Lyle Stieg did games from 77 to 78 with Roger Crozier, okay, I guess a former coach. And then Jim West, who I believe is from Baltimore, did it for quite a while, from 78 through 83 with various color partners. Doniger did some games. Nick Charles, the late Nick Charles, who was on Channel 4 before George Michael. Jack Lynch, who I don't remember. Yvonne LeBray, first number retired by the Capitals, number 7. And then Home Team Sports formed in 1984. And I do remember this. The original pair that did Capitals games, Al Koken, who I worked with for years in radio, he did the color and fill-in play-by-play. Mike Fornes was the play-by-play guy from 1984 to 1990. Then Jeff Rimmer, who I think has been in Florida for a long time doing the Panthers, he did it with Craig. Craig Laughlin made his debut with Jeff Rimmer in 1990. Then Kenny Albert, before he took off with his huge national career, was on HTS with Craig, and Craig also did games on Channel 20 with Jeff Rimmer. That was 92, 93, 93, 94. It was Kenny again, same situation. But Sean Simpson did games on Channel 20 with Rimmer, and Laughlin stayed together with Kenny. And then Kenny left to, go do what he's been doing for 30 years. And he does every sport, and he's great. But Beninati replaced him in 1994, and he and Craig have been together ever since with Alan May filling in. And then for the Bullets, Baltimore Bullets, Washington Bullets, Washington Wizards. That's the first team I remember watching other than the Redskins, and they were still in Baltimore at the time. But Channel 5 was carrying games, I think as early as like the late 60s, and Jim Carvelis did it. And then Channel 20 picked up games, and Bullets watching for me when I was in junior high and high school was with Jim Carvelis and several different color analysts. But the main one I remember was Jerry Kapstein, who was a George Washington law student, liked basketball, I guess introduced himself to Carvelis. I don't even know if they paid him, but it was Kapstein and Carvelis, and they did the games. And Kapstein, who was schmoozing clients for future work, I think at one time he was Reggie Jackson's agent, would always refer to people as the greatest gentleman in sports. So he could kind of sidle up to him for future work, I guess, as an agent. I just remember that. This I don't remember at all, but I looked this up. I was out of town at the time. People may remember this. John Sterling who just retired last year as the Yankees radio announcer. He's in his 80s. John Sterling did the Bullets on TV 1980 to 1981, and he did it with James Brown. James Brown got his first television break working color with Jim Carvelis. JB had gone into the executive program at Xerox after graduating from Harvard, and they were looking for an analyst, and they said, well, James, legendary high school player, great player at DeMatha, almost made the Hawks. Let's try him, and that launched his career. But Sterling did it for 1 year. Then there was a guy named Dave Cohen, who is known as Coney Island Dave Cohen. He was he worked with Costas for a while. I think he was a college classmate. He's done a lot of broadcasting. He did the Bullets games with JB 82-83, and then Mike Patrick took over the play-by-play. I remember did it with Wes Unseld for a while, and then Home Team Sports comes in, and it's Mel Proctor, because Proctor did both the Orioles and the Bullets on TV, and John Miller, who did the Orioles radio, he also would fill in doing Bullets games from time to time. And then when Proctor left in 1997 to go do the San Diego Padres, Steve Buckhantz took over, and Buck did their games from 1997 to 2019. Don't get me started on how stupid that was. And then they had some other guy who did it for a few years, and now it's who is it? It's Miller, right? Yeah. So they have their history, but if you look at the long runs of people in this town, the long way of getting to this point, there's only really been 3 on local TV that have done it for a long period of time. And one of them is Steve Buckhantz, another one is Joe Beninati, and another one is Bob Carpenter. And I think you can think of Bob Carpenter in that group, that, staying on TV for a long time with all these changes that you see, to get 20 years in is really impressive. And unfortunately, Phil Chenier got booted after like 30 years, which was really stupid. And now, Steve Buckhantz getting kicked out the door, and the ratings have been terrible. Bob's leaving on his own terms, it appears, although the Masson deal has only 1 more year. So the Masson contract will end at the end of this season for the Nationals. It may stay for the Orioles. We don't know. That's very much in flux. But I think Bob looked at this like, I've worked a reduced schedule in recent years. I'm 72, and there's going to be big changes coming for the television partner. And I don't know if he wanted to negotiate any kind of a long-term deal with somebody else. So there'll be somebody new coming in. Hope it'll be good. Hope he'll be as good as Bob. I hope he'll be as good a guy as Bob, because you won't find a better guy than Bob Carpenter. And I will miss him, because, this is what happens with announcers. And this is what the Wizards didn't understand about Buckhantz. People get comfortable with announcers. They get used to seeing them. And if you decide, and you're Ted's kid coming out of school, and you need something to do, and you want to get somebody younger in there, it doesn't always work out, does it? It doesn't work out. So I congratulate Bob on a great run. It's his decision. He's going to spend more time with his family. Good for him. But thank you for the last 19 years, and looking forward to year number 20 coming up. Bram is coming up next. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.